Christ has come, so wait the day. Mother comes, await the day.
Still your life if you want to pray. Send all cares far away. Sing and love's ever near. Isis comes, await the day. Isis comes, await the day. Mother comes, await the day.
Your heart if you want to pray. Send all cares far away. Sing then, love's ever near. Isis comes, await the day. Isis comes, await the day. Mother comes, await the
Still
day.
your heart if you want to pray. Send all cares far away. Sing then, love's ever near. Isis comes, await the day. Isis comes, await the day. Mother comes, await the day. Still your soul if you want to pray.
Your soul if you want to
Still your soul if you want to pray.
Your soul if you want to
Still your soul if you want to
Your soul if you want to
Still your soul if you want to
Your soul if you want to Your soul if you want Your soul if you want to pray.
Isis comes, await the day.
Isis comes, await the day.
Mother comes, await the day.
Our weekly readings are taken from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Anandas. This is week 21, The Best Way to Worship. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. John, the woman of Samaria asks Jesus, "Where is the best place to worship?" This question might be expanded to include, what is the best church? What is the best religion? Is it important to go on pilgrimage to holy shrines? What is the best ritual? What is the best mantra or prayer? Jesus cut across all such questioning with his reply, "The hour cometh, and now is, when true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." It was not that the outer considerations of place, church, ritual, etc. are irrelevant. Each person should find those practices and observances which are compatible with his own nature, one might say with his own vibrations. Not everyone, naturally, is on the same path. God has sent different religions into the world to satisfy different human needs. The overarching concern, however, considering that the goal is to find God, is to include in one's worship daily inner communion with the Lord. God is silence. He must be sought, therefore, in inner silence. God is absolute love. He must be sought, therefore, in the silence of love. God is spirit, and thus immaterial. He must be sought above all in the expanding peace of deep meditation. Thus, the Bhagavad Gita states in the 6th chapter, sequestered he should sit, steadfastly meditating, solitary, his thoughts controlled, his passions laid away, from every craving for possession freed. Wherever you are, whatever your outward beliefs and observances, seek God in the silence of your own soul. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our light bearers today as well, my dear friends, Swami Mari and Hanuman. And we're joined by Surendra and Lorna as well as our blessers. So, this morning's topic is really important, and I'd like to begin with a dialogue from Marvel's Infinity Wars. Where is Gamora? I'll do you one better. Who is Gamora? I'll do you one better. Why is Gamora? The question of why. So we've got all these questions of the best place to worship. Where is the best place? What is the best mantra? We have all these questions. But the most important one, isn't it, is why? Why do we worship? Why would we ever even want to worship? Why should we worship? So I grew up in a Presbyterian family. My father is a Presbyterian minister, so I grew up in the church. And as a young child, I had many beautiful experiences that just left my heart open and singing in that beautiful, blissful spirit of teenagers singing music of Godspell and Pass It On, things like that. And I was deeply touched by that, but of course, as the teenage years came on, then everything kind of closes up, and you protect yourself, and you go to church because you have to. And I would listen to my dad preaching, and I would, yeah. But yet I wondered, do I really believe in God? I don't know. And it wasn't until I had my Saturn return close to 30 that I finally got the answer. So in the meantime, I always had this underlying question: what does it mean to be a true Christian? So I had my dad as an example, and my dad was just serving constantly. He was always gone, always in meetings, always doing something. So I thought, well, I guess that's the way to do it. So I got involved in our Presbyterian church down in Evansville, Indiana, and got involved on the pastor nominating committee, and I was leading the youth group and singing in the choir and doing all these things and basically running myself ragged. And I had no idea what meditation was or how to do it. And I knew at some point I was going to have to learn, and sure enough, that moment came when I hit that rock bottom. I had worn myself out, I had no balance, and I had to find out what it was that I was missing. So I thankfully found meditation, and it opened up the why for me, because it allowed me to find that stillness, to find that silence. And once I did, and I really had never encountered that a little bit in music and nature, but never to this degree of like, wow, that presence of love that just came over me when I sat to meditate, or that joy that I thought would never be able to disappear, but of course it did that very next day. We all know how it is. Oh, I'm never going to forget this experience until I lose 3 socks in the laundry machine. And it's like, where's my socks? And where's my inner peace? Where it should have been what I would have been asking there. So that question of why is tied into our feeling nature. We are spiritual beings in this human body, and that aspect of why touches into our core being of how do we want to feel. And that essence of joy, that essence of happiness that we are all looking for can come through this idea of worship. Now, I have to put a little caveat in here. The word that we use, worship, I just realized as I looked it up, it's not the first or most authentic word for this idea. And so I looked it up, and there's original Greek and there's original Hebrew rather. And the original Hebrew is tied into sacrifice. There is an element of this sacrifice that they had in the temples, and for which the lambs and the doves and all these things were ritually sacrificed as a way of offering that up. And then I looked in the Sanskrit translation, there are hundreds of words that mean worship. Hundreds of words. And it was also interesting to look into the root of the word worship. And in the Old English, it had to do with worthiness. And how many else of you out there have to deal with personal worthiness? I'm sure I'm not the only one. And this is fascinating because the idea of like, I'm not worthy, I worship thee, I'm not worthy, it goes against the very principles that Jesus and Krishna were talking about in these passages, to be able to worship in spirit and in truth. So going back to this biblical reading, I have to offer my gratitude for this woman of Samaria. So you heard of the Good Samaritans, and this land Samaria was where this group of people is an ethno-religious group of people, and they were once a part of the Israel nation, and this was fascinating to me. So it's not like there's some heathens worshiping the golden calves or whatever. They were actually they are of the Hebrew tradition that goes way, way, way back. And they got separated, this is interesting, because of the argument of where God's presence is and where he should be worshipped. And that's why she asked Jesus at this point, should he be worshipped in Jerusalem? You guys are saying that God should be worshipped in Jerusalem, but our ancestors say, no, God's presence was here because this is where God told Abraham, wait, stop, don't sacrifice your son. And so that was where God was, and that's where they held that power was and that it should be worshipped. And so to set the scene a little bit more for this passage of John, so Jesus is coming from either Galilee to Judea or Judea to Galilee, and they have to pass through this town. And the disciples went off to the market to buy some meat, and Jesus comes to rest at this well called Jacob's Well, because that's where this plot of land that goes way, 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 way back to the time of Jacob, and he had given this parcel of land to his son Joseph. And perhaps you know these Old Testament stories. So he's in a very, very historic place, and it's hot, and the noonday sun is down, and this woman comes up to the well. Now, you have to wonder, with a master like Christ, did he know it was coming? Was he able to foresee what was going to happen? So this woman comes up to draw her own water from the well, and Jesus says, hey, can you give me a drink? I'm a little hot here. And because he's walking, he's not carrying the implements which you need in order to draw the water from the well. And she looks at him, and this division between the Jews and the Samaritans is very, very deep. And there's a lot of strife between them, and they don't associate. Like the caste in India, the Brahmins do not associate with the lower caste, these Shudras. And so this woman says, hey, I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew, why are you asking me of this? And Jesus said, but if you knew who was asking, you would ask me for this living water. And so as a choir director, I have to thank this one because we wouldn't have this beautiful song, Living Water, for this. But also, she starts asking him these questions. And then she says, hold on. And he says, yes, go and fetch thy husband and come back. And she says, I don't have a husband. And this is the really interesting moment. Jesus says, that is true. In fact, you had 5 husbands, and the man that you are living with now is not your husband. And so she takes all this in. And if it were me, I would have been like, oh, but she has the guts to say, you're a prophet. And she recognizes this, and then she asks this question. So she has the guts to stand there, to own her life, and to then ask this question. And Yogananda writes about this, that she was a disciple that had erred and gone. So much of Jesus' life is working with collecting these lost disciples, of bringing them back, of touching base with them. And so he goes on then to speak these words, that God is not to be sought either in your mountain or in Jerusalem, but within. God is a spirit and must be worshipped in spirit and in truth. So Yogananda goes on to say that Jesus recognized and gave this test to her and was very satisfied with her answer, and then gave her this presence. And then she goes off and she tells the people of her town, there's this amazing guy at the well. You got to come hear what he has to say. And I have to believe that it was not just these words that he spoke, but also the vibration that he must have conveyed. I mean, to have that moment. I mean, can you imagine what it would have been like to have a moment with a great master? I had the good fortune to, my experience in this is with my good fortune to be with Swami Anandas in some brief instances when we were just simply alone together. And the words that were said were not that important. Oftentimes you feel like, oh gosh, I should say something. I should ask something. And in that moment, of course, you can't think of anything intelligent to ask him. But the most important thing is to pick up on that vibration, to pick up in that true vibration, that true magnetism, and that true attunement to get where you want to go. Which again brings us back to the why of worship. The why of worship is defined by everything that we do here. Yes, if the true intention is to worship God within, then what are we all doing here? Shouldn't we just be off meditating by ourselves? Well, the benefit of this is that everything that we do here in this service is there to benefit and to help encourage and support your quest for that offering, that important self-offering. And Swami Anandas talks about this self-offering as the inner pilgrimage. Now, many of you have perhaps gone on pilgrimage. I have been fortunate enough to go to Italy, to India briefly, and to Israel, to the Holy Land. And this is an incredible and very, very important aspect of the spiritual life, to take a break from your normal everyday life and to consciously go somewhere with the intention of drawing spiritually. And the blessings that I received there have helped shape who I am and have helped shape my life and my intentions on the spiritual path. And so this inner pilgrimage is that sense of offering everything up. And coming back to that word sacrifice again, sometimes we associate that worship as something that we ought to do, something that's socially acceptable, something that we, as people have to do. And I think one of the problems in today's churches is that people are waking up to that why. They're going to the church and saying, well, this isn't really doing it. It's not feeding that sense of connection. It's not feeding that sense of spiritual depth that I'm looking for. And thank goodness for churches like these that can offer directly and that universal experience and say, no, it's not about us and keeping us in a little box, but rather about saying, okay, what is the best way for you to worship? And the universality of these teachings is that God must be worshiped in spirit and in truth. And worshiping in spirit is bliss, is opening ourselves up to that opportunity to feel, to that opportunity to then return and offer up. And the Yogananda goes on to say that God is spirit, and we are reflections of that spirit. And again, for me, this is like, it really cracks open my head and brings all these questions of worthiness, because if that's really true, then God is in here. God is to be worshiped, not in the ego, like, yes, oh, look at me, I need to worship myself. But rather, I have this seed inside of me that is there to be found, And I had this incredible experience at the beginning of Finding Happiness. We had gathered at Swami Anandas' apartment to meet with the directors, and this is a whole other story that I love to tell, and the Elizabeth Rome, the star of the show, and the spiritual people from Ananda who are directing the film as well. And after the meeting, which went very, very well, they all went off and were talking about nuts and bolts. And then all of a sudden, I just felt this presence overwhelm me, as if to say, hi, I'm the star of the show, and I want you to portray this vibration. And so I vowed then and there to make that my priority. And I told this story to a woman who came from India to interview us, and told her that must, I don't know, was that Babaji? Was that the spirit of Yogananda? And she said, well, David, maybe it was just yourself. And I said, what? How? Wow. And that was, I don't know if I had the courage to start to look at that, but truly, we are all connected. We are all unified, not only to each other, but to God. And this aspect that the divine is reflecting through us gives us this opportunity not to set about worshiping in the spirit of like, oh, it's something I have to do, it's something that I should do, but a sense of adventure, a sense of exploration, a sense that, yes, something is there to be discovered. And for me, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you into my church of music. So we're going to sing, and I'm going to give, not as a choir, but as a congregation, I'm going to take you through this process of discovering what it is like to worship inside my world, which is music. And truly, we all have these different ways of worshiping. I was one of those nice young boys that liked to fit myself into a little box. And so I, wanted to fit where I wanted to fit. And now I'm discovering that there is so much freedom in individuality. We all have these different ways that we worship. Some, like this gorgeous, gorgeous altar, is an incredible way to worship. Could I do that? No, that's not my way. And Swami Anandas said that he once had a vision in which he saw every person in the room and their way that they were going to find God, their individual way of truly worshiping. Because to truly worship means to find that joy, to find that essence of what lights us up, of what resonates within us to such a degree that that's where we feel the presence of God first. For instance, like in Chariots of Fire, when the one man said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And that was a form of worshiping for him, to just hold his head up and to run and to just feel that presence of God. It's not in any way serving. It's not in any way having any direct immediate result on people, except for the fact that when he raised his vibration, when he brought that resonance of God within him, he was then uplifting everyone around him. Can you imagine what it would be like if everyone found, not only here, but just in our communities in Portland, was able to find what brought the resonance of God within them and was able to tap into that and to then share that through the world. Imagine walking down the street, taking a bus ride and feeling that sense of upliftment from everyone. And of course, that's what they tell us is the fate of the higher yugas and the higher ages. We have to wait till then, but it doesn't hurt to imagine. So every one of you has a direct way of worshiping. Mine happens to be through music. I feel God's presence shine through. And what I'd like to do is invite you into this, just an example, as we go. So we're going to sing the simple song Cloisters. If you have a chanting book nearby, it should be in there. I'm sorry, I should... It is on page 38. Does anybody need one of these books? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to just sing through it once, and then we're going to stop and feel. Because the part of worship is not to blindly worship. It is to take what is there, to harvest it, and to raise it and offer it back up. This is painless offering. This is the kind of worship that, as a musician, on a low budget, sometimes that it's a little like, okay, I'll worship with my money, but really it's just a little bit that I have. So, but I learned that this kind of offering is that kind of offering which is painless and is joy-filled. Because when you expand, when you offer up that sense of joy, that sense of love, that sense of peace, it doesn't go away. It's not like, oh, I offered it, it's gone. Okay, I'll have to go back and get some more. It's when you feel that connection, and this is one of the most blissful experiences in meditation, is you get there and you're in that spot, and you're connected. There's this cycle. There's this river of joy that is flowing and doesn't have to necessarily go away. So, Cloisters goes like this. Long I've called you, my Lord, and feel free to sing along. Long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? And then closing your eyes, bring your awareness within. And allow your breath to expand and relax. And with your awareness, search within for any change, any glimmer, any spark, feeling, vibration. And for a moment, allow that to expand, no matter how tiny the glimmer might be, giving it the space to vibrate, to resonate. And a clear and open inner environment. And then start to draw that energy, whatever it might be, up to the spiritual eye. And in this sense of worship, let's sing it again. With every inhalation between each phrase, feel like you're drawing back into that well of living water. Living because it's there. God is ever new, ever existing bliss, ever conscious bliss. Here we go again. Long I've called you, my Lord. Long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion, offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? And again, resting in that space. And again, taking whatever tiny glimmer that might have been there and asking yourself, what is the best way for me to worship? Is it through service? Is it through teaching? Is it through serving? Through any of the myriad ways that we can serve? And then asking yourself the question, what is holding me back from the joy of worship? What is holding me back from offering myself not as a sacrifice, but as a willing instrument to feel more joy, to feel more connection, to feel more of that truth that we are children of God, that the connection is ours to make. I'd like to end with this reading from Whispers. It's short, but it hits the nail on the head. O Father, from joy I came, for joy I live. In joy will I melt again. Thou art sacred perennial joy. Thou art the joy I seek. Thou art the everlasting joy of the soul. Teach me to worship thee through the joy born of meditation. Balance my worship with good action, and teach me to shun all false pleasures which siren-like call to me through my misguided senses. Teach me to worship thee through the joy born of meditation. Om, peace, amen.
This next song is simply called God's Call Within. Also written by Swami Anandas.
Hands Good morning, all. I just wanted to remind you of things coming up on the schedule. Today, right after service, you can stay in with Joy if you'd like, and join our Healing Prayer Council circle. We do this once a month, and we pray for the world, we pray for individuals. Everybody is welcome to join in, and we'll ring the little bell and invite you back in here to join in if you'd like. Then later this week, on Friday, the 31st, the end of May, we will have our kirtan. And that's always a lot of fun, chanting with brief periods of meditation led by our wonderful kirtan musicians. And it will be at the Living Joy Center, which is our community room in our community space. If you haven't been there, you should come and join in. It's fun. If you need to know how to get there, let us know. That's next Friday at 7 o'clock. And then we want you to let you know that we're having more guest ministers. We had a wonderful time with Shanti Rubenstone, who was here from Palo Alto last week. And next weekend, we have Niranjana and her husband coming, Mahadev is his name, coming from Anandas, Seattle to join us and have service here with us. And then we have other ones lined up, so we'll let you know. Dambar and Manisha, who you may be familiar with, they're coming back down from Seattle June 16th. So pick up the new June calendar or go online and see what's happening, because May is wrapping up and June is next. If you have any questions at all, please let us know. Thanks for coming.